Supersets, drop sets, blood flow restriction. You've probably heard these called advanced bodybuilding techniques, but do they actually build more muscle, or are they just flashy gimmicks? A brand new peer-reviewed review published in the Strength and Conditioning Journal by Gonzalez and colleagues looked at all the research, and the truth might surprise you. The researchers analyzed 9 popular strategies bodybuilders use to try to maximize hypertrophy. This includes supersets, drop sets, lengthened partials, pre-exhaustion training, rest pause, forced reps, pyramidal loading, interset stretching, and blood flow restriction. Here's the big picture. These methods don't consistently outperform traditional resistance training when you match training volume. In other words, if you do the same amount of hard work, you'll typically get the same amount of muscle growth. Typically. So that doesn't mean these strategies are useless. And let's break that down. Supersets and drop sets are time efficient. Study after study shows they produce similar gains to straight sets when the total work is matched. But here's where the benefit really kicks in. Because they save time, you can actually fit in more volume during a workout. And since training volume is one of the strongest predictors of hypertrophy, supersets and drop sets can help you indirectly grow more. Not because they're magic, but they let you pack more work into the same session. In fact, one study by Verovich and colleagues found that when men used drop sets on the leg extension without equating volume, meaning they did more total work, their quads grew significantly more than the traditional control group. Now, lengthened partials, so training only in the stretched position of a movement, seem to show the clearest benefit for the gastrocnemius, which is the upper part of the calf muscle. Cassiano and colleagues reported greater hypertrophy in both the medial and lateral heads when overload is applied in that lengthened position. For the biceps and quads, the evidence seems a little more mixed. Some studies, such as the research conducted by Sato and colleagues, found greater growth in the distal biceps region when trained at a lengthened position. But other studies, such as Schneider and others, reported practically equivalent growth in both the upper arm and lower thigh when comparing lengthened partials with a full range of motion. The triceps have also been studied, but the data seems limited and honestly inconclusive at this point. Now, what's fascinating and worth mentioning is that no study to date has shown that a full range of motion outperforms training in a lengthened position. So at worst, lengthened partials seem just as effective, and at best, they may provide a hypertrophy edge in certain muscles and regions. One possible reason for this is that adding lengthened partials after reaching failure might prolong mechanical tension and increase overall training volume, both of which could enhance hypertrophy. But we need more research before calling this a universal training strategy. Pre-exhaustion, like doing leg extensions before going and hitting squats, or pec deck before doing bench press, is usually marketed as a hypertrophy trick. And honestly, most of research doesn't really show that it grows more muscle. If anything, it can make you weaker on your bigger lifts. Having said that, that's kind of what makes it smart for injury prevention and load management purposes. So say you're very strong and you're squatting heavy loads that put a lot of stress on your joints. Pre-fatiguing your quads with leg extensions means you'll likely need less weight for your squats, which is fine. The squat will still feel or be perceived as brutally hard, but the absolute load is indeed lighter, which can help reduce joint forces and reduce that injury risk. Another possible benefit of pre-exhaustion is that it may also help manage systemic fatigue. So by reducing the absolute load on multi-joint lifts, such as your squat or bench press, you're placing less overall stress on the nervous system and the connective tissues, which can make it easier to recover between sessions and still ensure that the target muscles are sufficiently challenged. So for pure hypertrophy, pre-exhaustion doesn't have much evidence, but as a tool for safety, longevity, and fatigue management, especially in really strong lifters, it absolutely has a place. Now, rest pause training looks a bit more promising. By taking very short rests within a set, you squeeze in more quality reps with the same load in less time. Some studies in the review have shown that it may even boost thigh hypertrophy, but the overall evidence is still limited. One variation of rest pause you may have heard of is called Myo-Reps. Here's how Myo-Reps work. You do your normal set, say 12 repetitions. After completing those 12 repetitions, you rest for 5 seconds. After the 5-second rest, you attempt 3 to 4 more reps. Now rest another 5 seconds and repeat attempting 3 to 4 more reps. You repeat that sequence until you fail to get at least 3 repetitions. This is extremely intense and hasn't been formally studied yet, at least not in this review. I was really hoping that this specific rest pause technique was going to be addressed in this paper, and it wasn't. So I'm still hoping that someone looks at this soon because I'm very curious what they would find. Next are forced reps. And the science doesn't look too great for these. But if I'm being honest, the references included in this review were pretty weak. One major issue I had was that the researchers didn't clarify how exactly spotters assisted during these forced reps. Did they help only with the concentric? Did they slow down the eccentric as well? Did they provide full assistance or just enough for the lifter to complete the repetitions? Those details are pretty important and they were glossed over. So I will say from a coaching standpoint, I've noticed something the research clearly missed here. And it's that forced reps seem to have a bit of a psychological benefit. And I'll explain what I mean. So what I'll do is I'll assist with the concentric as needed, just enough support to get the bar up. And then I tell them to control the eccentric phase. I do this to help them get accustomed to a more challenging weight and also seems to allow them to ease into higher intensity training. And I will say at a minimum, forced reps do add volume, which we know is a driver of hypertrophy. So while the research doesn't seem to strongly support this strategy, I really wouldn't dismiss them entirely. Pyramid sets, so increasing or decreasing the weight across sets, are very common. But again, studies have shown they're no better than performing straight sets for muscle growth. They seem to be good for variety, but they are not essential. Interset stretching, so stretching the muscle you just trained during the rest period or at the end of your last set, shows mixed results. In untrained lifters, Evangelista and colleagues found greater growth in the vastus lateralis. And even when looking across multiple sites, such as the biceps, triceps, rectus femoris, and the vastus lateralis combined, the Interset stretching group saw bigger improvements than the traditional resistance training group. Another study found benefits for the soleus muscle in the calf, but not the gastrocnemius. So the soleus is the lower part of the calf near the Achilles. And again, the gastrocnemius is that upper part below the knee. Now in trained lifters, the results seem much less convincing. One study showed a very small effect in the distal part of the triceps. So that means closer to the elbow, farther away from the center of the body. While others, like those on the chest, found no additional benefit. So practically, interset stretching may offer a small edge in beginners or untrained lifters in muscles such as the vastus lateralis and soleus, but for advanced lifters, I would not expect too much. Okay, here's a really cool one, which is blood flow restriction. If you're not familiar with blood flow restriction training, it simply means they'll use a cuff or a tourniquet-like cuff to restrict blood flow to the target muscle, which allows you to still grow muscle and you can use lighter weights. This is huge for people who are managing injuries or who are experiencing joint pain. Studies have clearly shown this can build muscle comparably to heavier lifting, which is really cool. So what's the verdict? Advanced training strategies are not some magic shortcut. Simply said, they don't beat the basics when it comes to muscle growth, but they are powerful tools. They save time, they add variety, And in certain cases, like blood flow restriction or pre-exhaustion, they may help you train around injuries or push past plateaus. So the next time you see someone hyping up drop sets as the ultimate growth hack, just remember, they save time, but the foundation is still progressive overload and training volume. If you'd like me to make a follow-up video showing how I would program these strategies into a real hypertrophy routine, please go ahead, drop a comment below, like if this was helpful, and subscribe for more science-based breakdowns. Train smart and stay strong. Peace.